Welcome back, 3D students. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add some patterns and symbols to your sock creature, and we're also going to look at how the UVW mapping affects, and we're also going to look at how the UVW mapping affects patterns. So let's get started. So this is where we left off. We have our creature here. I had painted a little stomach patch on him and painted his arms and legs different colors and painted the inside of his mouth a slightly different color. And I had added a turbo smooth on here, which I can turn on and off. And I've also changed the background color here so that we can see it better when we render. If you want to do that, come up to Rendering, Environment, and then you just simply click this color swatch here and change the color. So rather than try to paint patterns by hand in Photoshop, which you could do, and you might get a certain look with that, I think it would be good to sort of borrow from other patterns. So I've opened up Photoshop here, and I'm going to create a new layer above my existing layer for these patterns that I'm going to add. It's always a good idea to create a new layer when you're experimenting. So I did a search. I simply typed in cute patterns, and I found all sorts of things that I can use. These are some cute flowers, there's some hearts, there's some geometric shapes, there's just all sorts of things in here. And when you find something you might want, or some element that you might want, just simply grab it. I'll save this one. I'm going to use this one for flowers. And you just simply right-click on the preview, save image as, and put it in your downloads folder. You don't have to put it in your images folder because we're just going to use it for Photoshop. So I'll have a couple of these open in Photoshop. Here I'm going to use this one for clouds. I'm going to show you what this one looks like when we just apply stripes throughout the whole thing. I'm going to use this one for some flowers, and I'm going to use this one for hearts. So let me show you what it looks like when you just put stripes or a pattern directly on the creature. I'm going to hit Control A to select all of this pattern, then hit Control C to copy it. Then I'm going to come over here to my character texture, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste it on there. Now this is smaller than my image, so I'm going to hit Control T to transform it. And then I'm going to grab a corner node here and start to pull. And as I'm pulling, I'm going to hold down Shift so it doesn't distort. And then I'm also going to hold down Alt so it scales from the middle. And I'm going to do that and then hit Enter to accept that transformation. And I don't have to turn off my UVW layers here because they're already turned off. But I'm going to hit File, Export, Export As, and you have to do this every time you make a change. I'm going to click Export and overwrite the texture that I'm using. And then when we return to 3D Studio Max, you can see here that I get an error. Now, why I get this error, I don't know. But here is my image. You can see clearly that it has changed. So I'm going to click Reload here. And there we go. Now you can see that we have some distortion here in the stripes. They're not exactly straight. You can clearly see that around the legs. You can also see that where there's a seam in the UVW, we don't have continuity here for the stripes. Now that's just a fact of life. We could spend a lot of time trying to make those continuous across the thing, but I just believe that this is probably just not a good idea to just slap a pattern on your creature. So I'm going to return to Photoshop, and I'm going to turn on my UVW layers. And then I'm going to turn off, I'm actually going to delete this layer, sorry. And make a new layer, again, for my other pattern elements that I'm going to create now. So just for the sake of understanding how these UVWs are distorting the texture, in order to make this a straight stripe across, say, this leg right here, you would have to paint following the curvature of the mesh, and that would create a straight stripe across your creature. So let's do a heart. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to select this heart right here in the center. I'm going to come over here to my selection tools, and I'm going to find the magic wand tool, and I'm just going to click right in the center on that heart. And I'm going to push Control C to copy this selection. And I'm going to push Control C to copy this selection. Return to our character texture. And I'm going to create a new layer above the paint layer that I created before. Ignore this group of layers here. These are layers I created earlier that I've just hidden for the time being. And I'm going to paste that. And then I'm going to make that a little bigger. I'm going to hit Control T for free transform. Hold down Shift so it won't distort while I'm dragging. Make it a little bigger. And once you get it the size you want, hit Enter to accept the transformation. And now we need to make this into a selection because we're not going to use this sort of low-res pasted heart here. I'm going to make a new one. So with that layer selected, hold down Control and click on this layer swatch, and that creates a selection. And then I want to smooth this selection out because it's going to be a little pixelated. So let's go to Select, Modify, Smooth. I think I'm going to smooth it by 12 pixels. Click OK. And then let's create a new layer and turn off the first layer we created. And now here's where we're going to create our heart. So I want to fill this with the foreground color, whatever that is. Just click on that foreground swatch and create a color that you want. Click OK. And then to fill it with the foreground layer, hit Alt-Delete on your keyboard. And now we could just stop here. Let's hit Control D to deselect. Now if I want to add an outline to this, it's very easy to do. You just come over here and double click on the layer here, not here, but here, and that brings up the Layer Styles panel. We can do all sorts of things in here, but we want a stroke. So if you check stroke, then you immediately get an outline. If you click here in the stroke, in the Layer Styles menu, you get the settings for the stroke. And you can change its thickness, you can change its color, and whatever you want to change about it, and then click OK. And now we can take this heart and we can do whatever we want with it. We can scale it down. We could place it on his chest or right in the center here like that. Or we could duplicate the layer just by hitting Control C, Control V, and that's going to create a new layer. And we could make them small and place them all around our mesh here, just however we want. But every time you do, you have to hit Control V and it creates a new layer. So I'm going to put 2 hearts here just for the sake of illustration. I'm going to make them smaller. I'm going to hit Control T so I can make them smaller. And you have to push Enter each time you transform something. Then I'm going to copy them a couple more times just so you can see what it might look like if I were going to place a pattern of things around. And I'll leave it there. Now we got to turn off our UV's layers, and then we're going to go to File, Export As, and we're going to click Export and select the texture that we've created. Override it, click Yes, and every time you make an update to this texture, you're going to have to do that process. And there you have it. Now you can do this with any shape you want. You just simply find a shape that you want to use or part of a pattern you want to use and follow that same process. Let's do another one. So I'm back in Photoshop here, and I think I'm going to do this flower. So I'm going to zoom in some. Remember, I'm holding down Alt as I'm rolling my mouse wheel. And I'm going to select like so, and that selects this flower. I'm going to hit Control C, Go back to our character texture, make a new layer, and hit Control V, and that brings in the little flower. And then I'm going to hit Control T, hold down Shift and make it bigger so I can work on it, and push Enter to accept that enlargement. And now I'm going to hold down Control as I click on the layer swatch here to make that a selection. And I don't want this middle part. So I'm going to get my select tool here. I'm going to use rectangular select. I'm going to hold down Shift, and as I make my selection here, it's going to sort of add that center part to the selection. It was subtracted before. So you can see now it's one selection. Then we're going to go to Select, Modify, Smooth, and maybe I'll smooth this 12 pixels this time. And click OK. And then we're going to fill that with this foreground color swatch I have here, which is a hot pink. That is Alt-Delete. And then I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. So now I have this sort of flower shape, and you can see what the smoothing did. It sort of took out that corner there. Now if I want this to be a flower, what I can do is I get my brush, and I can use my bracket keys to enlarge my my brush, and I can paint that with an alternate color, say maybe a yellow, just right there in the center. Now that's very soft, so I'm going to come up to my brush settings here, and I'm going to make it 45% hard, and let's see what that looks like. That's better. So I'm going to hit Control T to make this smaller. Push Enter. And now I can turn on my UVs here and use this to place around our frog character. In order to put more flowers around, though, I'm going to switch to my Select tool here. I need to duplicate this layer. Now I can hit Control C, Control V, and just create more of them. Now that creates a new layer each time. You can see every time it's a new layer. And just kind of move them into place. And then to see what that looks like, we're going to turn off our UV layers. Go to File, Export As, click Export, click on our character textures, click Save, click Yes, and return to 3D Max and see what that looks like. Now again, we have some distortion because of the distortion of the UVs. Now I didn't put any on the arms, but you get the idea. Now before we leave this video, I want to create a couple of textures for the or materials for the buttons. So that's just simply a new physical material, drag it onto each button, select the shiny plastic or glossy plastic preset and change the color. And then we're going to make one for the threads. And I want white threads, so I'm going to make this white. And I'm going to kill the reflections because thread doesn't reflect. Jack up the roughness. And then I'm going to select all of my threads. And I'm going to drag the output node onto them. And it's going to say, you want to assign to this one object or to the whole selection. I'm going to select selection. And then I'm going to do a render of this and see what he looks like. So this is what my character looks like rendered. I think he looks pretty good. I didn't spend a whole lot of time placing these patterns on here. I just wanted to show you how to do it. I encourage you to use your creativity and, have fun with it. Now, before you leave this project, I want you to be sure to save your Photoshop file in your project folder. You may have to select on your computer here, and then just make sure you save it in the Scene Assets Images folder of your project folder, and make sure it's a Photoshop file. You should always save your Photoshop file in case you want to come back and access all your layers, and make changes. Now, you can apply a Photoshop file as a bitmap. So instead of picking our JPEG here, we could have picked our actual Photoshop file and used this for our base color map. And that would actually save us this whole, file export as overwrite thing. We could just click file save. We could just save our Photoshop file and it would carry through. Now, that does not work right now, at least for my version of 3D Studio Max. And I don't know if it's going to work at school, but that is something you could try. And in the next video, we're going to set up some nice studio lighting for our character, and I'll see you then.